Chapter 1. The Desert of Truth. Star System: Helvetios, 51 light-years from Sol. Planetary Body: Insignis. Humanity 2.0. Post-First Contact. Ra Guadalupe Pagassini smoothly rose to full height while running a hand across the length of the ancient scar etched deep into the side of his face. As he looked out to the endless dunes laid out in front of him, he could not help but be moved by the deafening silence of the inner desert. A sense of stillness, peace, and clarity seemed to infuse within him, as if he was becoming a part of the desert itself. They said this place was special, but like most things worth knowing, you had to experience it for yourself to truly understand. The sun goddess sat high in a clear blue sky, slightly towards his back, so for the time being at least, he was spared the uncompromising love of Helvetios, shining her divine light directly into his eyes. However, as the day wore on, even this small mercy would soon be denied, so he urged himself back to the sacred walk into almost certain death. This was the honoured path, and the ultimate test of a proto-elder's faith. Most would never return, their water flesh and bones becoming one with the desert sand. But those very few who did came back touched by God, and thus revealed to be worthy of her divine blessing. Ra Guadalupe's body was shrouded in pale cloth with matching hood. A small satchel lay draped lazily over one shoulder, coming to rest near his hip. A faded red utility belt wrapped its way loosely around his waist, upon which hung a number of small pouches, along with a bone knife housed within a leather sheath. Slung across his back hung 2 snakeskin flasks, offering him the opportunity to cling to life for just that little bit longer. Dangling loosely from his neck, more precious than even water, was the small bone-carved necklace in the shape of the sun goddess Ra. 9 serrated flames bound its circumference, and etched upon its face was an equidistant circle of eyes. At the centre were 2 thin lines tilted slightly upwards, giving it just the smallest hint of a smile. One of his hands now reached absent-mindedly towards the necklace to lovingly caress its blade of flames. As always, he then pressed the necklace softly to his lips before letting it fall lightly back to his chest. This small but sacred ritual never failed to reassure him of his unwavering commitment to the path. To achieve the fulfillment of sacred prophecy, or much more likely, to die trying, was the destiny he was born to. His faith was surely as deeply a part of him as the ancient scar he wore down the side of his face, a forever reminder of the foolish vanity of youth. Allowing fate to choose the way, He squeezed his eyes tightly shut against the sun and continued to walk blindly on. He could feel the sweat running across his brow, down the bridge of his nose, dripping away at the tip. Well, if death was coming, then let it come. It would mean a blessed end to the ceaseless suffering of cowardly doubt, insidiously gnawing away at his conviction. He knew such a shameful admission of weakness was profoundly unworthy of an aspiring elder, yet despite his greatest efforts, it still leached into his quivering heart, and, try as he might, he could simply find no way to wash himself clean of it. Only in contemplating the imminent surety of death was he at last able to find some small semblance of peaceful acceptance. In this singular moment of self-reflective clarity, he became acutely aware of the fact the less his spirit resisted meeting its end, the more a tiny kernel of hope stubbornly continued to grow back. In a sudden, blinding insight, he realized the key to his salvation was to bring an end to this endless cycle of infatigable hope that led inexorably back to fear. Ra Guadalupe, at last, understood the vanity-fueled allure of a superior mind and disease-free body was the poison chalice that endlessly seeded his suffering. The desert of truth was doing its job and stripping him bare of his lingering vanities, the final layers that stood between him and elderhood. Now feeling newly revived from a sense of purpose, fueled by revelation, he doggedly crested another dune as the ground shimmered in a way the wind did not call for. Quickly clearing his mind of all lingering distractions, he waited motionless and poised for something. After a brief moment of crystalline silence, the sand gently shifted again. Ra Guadalupe brought his knife to bear like a man who had done so 1,000 times before. He set his gaze to a single point, and like a cat preparing to pounce, became frozen in space and time. The sand and the man seemed to move as one, as he buried a hand deep into the side of the dune. "Got you!" he exclaimed victoriously, his tightly clenched fist revealing a 2-headed snake. With fangs bared wide, both heads instinctively curled towards his wrist, but with neither fear nor hesitation, he quickly gripped at a neck. As if whittling a piece of wood, he sliced the captive head clean off, deftly flipping the snake up into the air before snatching it back into his grasp. With an almost casual kind of contempt, he then relieved the remaining head of its body. The disembodied heads twitched and turned as they struggled fiercely to bury themselves back into the dune. There was, after all, still a small chance one might yet grow back to become two. Even in the unforgiving climate of the desert, life always seemed to find a way. Ra Guadalupe briefly lifted his gaze towards the shriek of a laughing falcon. With a spiritual sense of gratitude, he proceeded to mercifully kick sand over the desperately twitching heads. Taking hold of an almost empty flask, He drained what water remained into his mouth before refilling it with the fluids from the lifeless body of the snake. Ra Guadalupe shielded his eyes and returned a knowing gaze towards the avian marauder. He threw the now desiccated body high into the air as the falcon circled low across the horizon. Stoically returning to the sacred path, Ra Guadalupe turned a squinting gaze across the endless ocean of dunes that seemed virtually indistinguishable to those from the day before. His hand reached again for the necklace hanging from his neck and firmly reminded himself Ra lit the way with a light that saw all. Whatever was to become of him, her judgment would be final, beyond question or reproach. So he would yield willingly to her will, as had done countless others before, and, with Ra's divine blessing, countless others still to come. The day wore slowly on, while the sun god traced her way smoothly across the cloudless sky, as if to bear mocking witness to her disciples' hopelessly meandering passage. He had reluctantly, but inevitably, succumbed to his thirst, with each mouthful of water swallowed, reminding him he was one step closer to death. The sun continued to beat down mercilessly, and he pulled the hood low over his eyes in a futile attempt to stave off the searing rays of Ra's unforgiving love. Behind him, trailing off into the distance, was the track of his own footprints in a desert that now betrayed no other signs of life. Ra Guadalupe peered forlornly into the endless ocean of dunes, the last vestiges of hope evaporating from his parched and burning soul. Now, finally, unable to continue the fight, he fell to his knees in an act of fevered supplication. With the sun bearing down mercilessly upon him, he now found himself suddenly shrouded by a cascading rainbow of light. He idly wondered if this might be the first stages of delirium setting in, and could not help but feel cheated. His vision was not that of the much-fabled oasis. However, as his body began to vibrate, he quickly concluded this was surely much more than just the delusions of a dying man. He felt his heartbeat start to quicken, and any thoughts of thirst and fatigue were immediately banished from his mind. A deep, resonating rumble that made the very roots of his teeth ache reverberated thickly through the air. Truly, then, it felt as if it was coming from the very core of Insignis itself, lifting the entire earth up from beneath him. It spoke of almost incomprehensible power. So who knows? Perhaps this really was God revealing herself unto him. Before he could properly collect his wits, the rumbling quickly faded away, replaced by the sudden appearance of an impossibly large and symmetrical dome. Surely no man could have made such a thing. And how could a structure so massive be kept hidden with nothing but endless dunes of sand all around it? As he stared at the giant silver dome, unable to quite comprehend exactly what now stood before him, a small, pitch-black half-circle bloomed into the side of the massive structure. This strange hole of impenetrable darkness seemed to eat all the light around it, and the desert was now filled with an airy kind of silence. Filled with a terrible sense of foreboding, he waited with held breath for whatever was about to come next. Set against the massive silver dome, the dark hole seemed to shimmer and distort, as if it had magically come to life. Its shape began to deform and mutate. No longer the geometrically perfect circle it had been just scant moments prior. As Ra Guadalupe struggled to make any sense of the abstract, amorphous scene unfolding, his frame of reference suddenly flipped. He realized with some considerable amount of horror what he was witnessing was some sort of creature that had now exited the hole and was moving directly towards him at an astonishing rate of knots. The dunes that shrouded the giant silver dome offered a rough sense of scale, which at least allowed Ra Guadalupe to estimate the dome was quite some distance away, perhaps an hour's hike. But the sheer speed at which the creature traversed the sand told him he had precious little time before its arrival. Small puffs of dust trailed along behind it, recording its relentless path towards him, and there was no doubt that it was to him it was coming to. Ra Guadalupe's first instinct was to turn and run. But running from a creature that could move at such speed would surely be an act of utter futility. Despite the desert's immense heat, the sudden chill of fear raced from one end of his spine to the other. He had always promised himself he would meet his own end with courage and dignity, no matter what fate were to bring him. As it turned out, though, that end may well be at the hands of a terrible monster, rather than the slow and relentless heat of the sun. Well, little matter. He would meet his destruction by looking death directly in the face, eyes open and unblinking, even if that face was something entirely beyond his kin. He reached involuntarily for his knife, which he quickly abandoned as an act of futile stupidity. The monster was now almost upon him, and it appeared to have a disturbingly large number of legs. They continued to pump up and down relentlessly, throwing a storm of dust up into the air. With the beast almost upon him, he grasped the necklace, held it to his lips, and, in shameful betrayal of his promise, tightly closed his eyes.